Commission into Bundaberg Hospital has called for Dr. Jayant Patel to be charged with murder.
He faced a laundry list of disciplinary action.
This is a national problem. This could have happened in any hospital around Australia.
We're seeing these patients dying every day.
Hello, I'm Caroline Jones. Tonight, the untold personal story of the nurse who lifted the lid on a medical scandal. This is making front page news not just in Australia, but around the world. Toni Hoffman is nurse in charge of the intensive care unit at Bundaberg Base Hospital in Queensland. For 2 years, she tried to raise concerns about the lethal activities of a surgeon called Jayant Patel, a man now accused of murder. Toni Hoffman emerged as the star witness at the Commission of Inquiry investigating Dr. Patel and the Bundaberg Hospital. Tonight, she reveals the inside story of her harrowing journey to ultimate vindication.
Barry passed away on the 1st of October 2003. Dr. Patel actually said to us that he had a very aggressive cancer. He decided that he would operate, but we have found out only a couple of months ago that the tumour was not malignant, that there was no cancer. I may be asked for my approval to have Barry's body exhumed. I would not hesitate to agree.
People think because you work with death and dying on a daily basis that you become immune to it, but I've been a nurse now for over 20 years and I'm not immune to it. I still cry when my patients die.
To make a complaint about a surgeon, you really have to be very brave. Toni, to actually stand up and make a complaint about Dr. Patel, I think it was, something fairly incredible and something that's probably never happened anywhere, not in Australia, not in any other hospital that I've known in 30 years of nursing.
I just thought that she was certifiable all the way through it. I just couldn't believe that she would take the risks that, in pursuing this and making sure that that the right things happened, that Dr. Patel's practice was looked at.
I never thought about being a nurse. When I first went into the hospital, I remember smelling that smell, in the hospital, and just feeling sick. But I did like the thought of helping people. I went to England fairly soon after I'd finished my training, and I did my midwifery. Then I did my ICU course in London and worked in a private intensive care unit, caring for really very critically ill patients. Worked with a lot of really brilliant surgeons. In 1988, I went over to Saudi for 5.5 years at that time, I said, during the Gulf War. When I came back from Saudi, the second time this job in Bundaberg was advertised, it was as nurse unit manager at the intensive care unit. I'm responsible for the running of the unit. He looks like he might be developing some sort of... I had to be somewhere stable so that I could finish my masters in bioethics that I was doing. I just had always been really interested in bioethics. Working in intensive care, you're faced with life and death decisions all the time. I finished the masters at the end of 2002 and Dr. Patel started in 2003. The first patient that I recall that we had in the ICU that belonged to Dr. Patel was a patient who had actually been refused surgery in Brisbane for cancer of the esophagus.
They told him that it was too complex, given his conditions, and that he would die if it were attempted.
But then Dr. Patel said that he would do the surgery in Bundaberg, and he actually came back to ICU extremely ill, and I think he spent 5 days in the unit before he actually died. Another doctor and myself went up and spoke to Dr. Keating, the medical director, about how wise it was to be doing this sort of surgery in a small hospital like Bundaberg. We were told that we had to continue to do these operations.
You can see it becoming more of a business. We were pressured all the time to meet targets, which to me was not looking at people's needs. It was looking at what was going to make the hospital money.
Dr. Patel very rarely offered anybody an option that didn't involve surgery. It was almost like he was really looking for people to operate on. He would have been probably in the ICU by 6:30 in the morning. He was still there, sometimes 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, even when he wasn't on call.
Dr. Patel is a man of many faces, I guess. He can be very charming, but if he is challenged by something, he can not be so pleasant.
He's basically told people that, you're very lucky to have had me looking after your family member because I'm a trauma specialist from New York. He also claimed to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, a vascular surgeon and a cancer specialist.
For the executive, he was like anyone's dream. For us, when we saw the complication rate and what was going on and the readmissions to theatre and all of that sort of thing, he was a nightmare. There were the drugs he was ordering that were old-fashioned. There was the types of treatments. There were things that he was writing in the chart that weren't correct. There was the delay in transferring patients out. I wrote an email to Darren Keating, the medical director, and asked that we have a meeting and try and work out what sort of surgery we were going to do. All of these things were ignored. Also at this time, Dr. Patel wasn't speaking to me at all. He would talk about me in front of me to the medical students, and he would say things like, you can see why this is such a difficult ICU to work in, but referring to me.
I noticed a few changes in Toni. The main one was she was quieter, because she was not usually quiet. And she wouldn't sleep. And it was disturbing to see her. She wasn't her usual cheerful self at all.
I didn't want to go out. I would come home and just think of what I could do. Dr. Patel didn't ever write that there was a complication or anything like that. And the junior doctors had actually told us in ICU that, they were told not to use certain words on the discharge summaries so that the coding wouldn't be right. So it's almost like they didn't occur.
People felt that Dr. Patel could basically do what Dr. Patel wanted to do, that he had free rein. He basically would always say that he had the support of the executive, the management, and that he was making them all this money.
Linda Mulligan's the director of nursing. Her advice to me was she gave me a book to read on how to deal with difficult people. It wasn't that we were dealing with difficult people here. It was that we were dealing with clinical incompetence and we needed someone to pay attention and listen.
But I knew that he was called Dr. Death. That was a term that was given to him by one of the anaesthetists.
So I remember asking one of the anaesthetists how would they rate Dr. Patel's expertise, and basically the response was back to me that, well, I wouldn't let him operate on me, which is alarming. And you think, well, what are you doing about it then? You're in a position to be able to do something about it.
There were doctors aware of what was going on, but they didn't respond as forcefully as the nurses, and in particular Toni Hoffman.
We had a patient who had a caravan roll on his chest. He was one of the other surgeon's patients. He needed to be transferred out. And then Dr. Patel came in and he just said, this patient doesn't need to go to Brisbane, very loudly, and put a stop to the transfer. I had actually begged the other surgeon, please transfer this patient out because he really, I'm really afraid he's going to die. There was a CT scan of the man's chest. They found that he had 3 litres of blood in his lung. And they decided, yes, they would send him to Brisbane. And they reactivated the team. I came back in the morning and I met the director of anaesthesia outside the lift. And I just said, oh, dear Mr. Brumich,